that. We're all pretty used to Teams meetings by now, aren't we? I think that's all the housekeeping I need to do. I'm going to start sharing slides, so let me just do that. Now, in terms of, I'm going to have the same problem I had last time, I think. Here we go. Now, can everybody see the slides? So first of all, welcome. Our guidance for attending a branch meeting, for those of you that have been to previous ones, these will be familiar. I won't go through them in detail, but I just wanted to remind everybody that AphA is an organisation for the members, by the members. Val is our only employee and therefore has a very, very busy role, but everybody else's time is voluntary, and we share a passion for analytics, healthcare analytics, and we try to be as inclusive as possible. So, you know, please put your hand up if you've got questions, put comments in the chat. There'll be chance for question and answers at the end of each of the sessions that we have. Everyone's contribution is welcome. Please stay on mute if not speaking, and you're encouraged to keep your camera on, but optional. Feel free to tweet or mention that you've attended on LinkedIn. I've got probably too much social media in my life, so I don't tend to tweet, but I do hang around on LinkedIn sometimes. So feel free to reach out and connect with the people on the call. This is very much a networking opportunity and building, and we're trying to build an analyst community. So do get in touch with each other outside of meetings. That's absolutely encouraged. Speakers are sometimes representing their organisation, sometimes representing themselves, and that will become obvious through the course of the meeting, which is which. So our agenda today is pretty packed. We're going to kick off with a presentation from Monica and Neil from Imperial College, and that's where I work as well, so colleagues of mine, and I'm very grateful to them for doing a presentation today. The reason why we've got a presentation on the new urgent and emergency care standards is that when at the end of each meeting, and we will come to it later, we ask everybody what sort of topics they would like to hear about at the next branch meeting. And so there will be a slot on the agenda later, and you can see if you get some time, you might want to go to menti.com, enter this number here, 7574046. Catherine will put that in the chat as well. There's also a QR link I think you can follow, and you can then participate in voting to what you want to hear about at the next meeting. But at the last meeting, people voted because they wanted to hear about the new and emergency care standards. Now, even if you don't work in acute care, I'm hoping this will still be of interest, because we've had the 4-hour standard for decades, and you know, it can impact whole health systems. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Neil and Monica. And here we go, over to you two.
Hi all. Yeah, so like Ruth says, my name's Neil McGurn. I work at Imperial. I'm one of the deputy heads of business intelligence. So I look after the reporting teams, including one of which is the business intelligence business partner team for medicine and integrated care division, which is led by Monica. I don't know if you want to just jump in and say hello quickly, Monica. Introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Monica. I'll speak to you in a bit after Neil's done his bit.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, we're going to do a double act today to kind of give you a bit of a brief introduction to the urgent and emergency care standards that we've been piloting at Imperial for a few years now. And just to give you an idea of structure, I'm going to focus on the background and the history of the pilot, and then I'll hand you over to Monica to take you through a bit more of the detail and bring you up to the current day. So what we've got here on the slide that we're showing is kind of the background, the case for change. So this work all started back in March 2019 with the publication of an interim report of the clinically led review of NHS access standards, which is a bit of a mouthful, and I absolutely did have it written down so that I could read it off my screen. This report covered a range of care settings, including routine elective care. There was cancer in there, there's mental health in there, and also, obviously, based on what we're talking about today, there's UEC in there as well. So this consultation set out the case for change for moving away from the old 4-hour target, which it said, having been introduced in 2004, was no longer adequate to measure an ED department. And the case for change was based on 5 arguments, 4 of which are on the slide here. I'll just try and summarize them quickly, kind of canter through them. First one is it's kind of a little bit misleading in that the standard doesn't measure a total waiting time, only gives you a partial picture. Second one is that it's a bit of a blunt tool. It doesn't differentiate between severities of conditions. So obviously you have a range of patients turning up for ED, some of which need more urgent treatment than others. Under a 4-hour target, everyone's treated the same. Thirdly, that it's kind of an incomplete standard. It only measures a small slice of what can be a very long and complex pathway. And fourthly, and I think this one's probably quite significant, possibly the most significant one, is that the target was having the effect of driving hospital processes in place of a clinical judgment. What I think that's trying to say is basically the target was affecting how trusts were managing their ED departments. Rather than a clinical judgment, this patient needs to be admitted. What you see is patients coming up to the 4-hour breach, being admitted just to get them off of an ED target. And when you look at the data that was presented through that interim report, they did a distribution of length of time that patients were spending in ED, and it's a very unnatural distribution. It peaks right up to 4 hours and then drops straight off, and there's a long tail. So it does seem like the target had kind of introduced inadvertent mechanisms to manage an ED department. And then the fifth one, which isn't on the slide, and I think they dropped it out of the paperwork depending on who you asked, was that the target wasn't necessarily universally understood. Although it's described as a simple target, not everyone was always clear what it meant, and they kind of made the statement that it wasn't well understood by the public. Now that was dropped from the narrative later, so I don't think they ever evidenced it, but that was kind of the case for change. So alongside this, there's been major changes in the way that urgent emergency care services had operated since 2004. There'd been whole new pathways developed, things around urgent treatment centres and SDEC. There'd been investment in specialist trauma, heart attack and acute stroke units. And from 2013-14, there'd been NHS 111 been introduced. So a lot of movement in the way that ED and urgent and emergency care was being provided. So for all these reasons, the paper proposed significant changes to the way that UEC services were going to be assessed and measured. And their overall goal was quite simple, just to change the targets to make sure that what's being measured is most important clinically and to patients, and to make the targets clear and straightforward to understand. So that was kind of what they're setting out to do. And you can see on the screen here, these are the pilot metrics that they came up with. There's 7 standards here, some of which are tweaks of existing standards, some of which are brand new. I'll go through them in a bit more detail. And if you could just flip onto the next slide as well, Ruth, please. These were the 14 pilot trusts, of which Imperial was one, that up and down the country agreed to try and run these indicators. So if we move on again on the next slide, please. A little bit of timeline here. So like a lot of these things, once the paper was written, the project initiated pretty quickly after that. So a month later, in April, the project was set up. And then we kicked off the first of 2 6-week-long phases of the pilot. So the first phase included some baselining work in May. And we also looked at indicators around so attendances, time in A&E and 12-hour wait were the indicators that we focused on there. The new one there is the total time in A&E, and the rationale for this is obviously to reduce very long waits for patients who need care. So that was the main new one in May. We then had a pause in July for a midpoint review, started again in August for the second phase, and this is where we see the bulk of the work that we did to develop the new indicators. So the time to initial assessment
think we lost him.
Yeah, Neil, are you there? He's cut out. Monica, are you there?
I am, Ruth. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Neil must have had a bit of an outage mid-presentation. I don't know whether you can take over or whether...
Yeah, no worries. I can do, yeah.
Great.
No
If you take over, Monica, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
No worries. So I think that slide you're on essentially gives you the date stamps of when we had different measures introduced. So, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, you're back.
Sorry, guys. I dropped out. My Wi-Fi dropped out at the worst possible time. Sorry, Monica. I'll take
to all
over.
of us, Neil, at some point over the past few months. Don't worry about it. Monica was ably stepping in, but we'll hand back to you.
Yeah, sorry, Monica.
Sorry.
So yeah, I think I dropped out around August 2019, which is where we were doing the bulk of the work. So time to initial assessment. This was one of the brand new indicators, which is a measure of efficiency for streaming and triaging patients. And there are a whole bundle of mental health metrics as well. So there's time to referral for psych assessment, time to psych assessment, and time to discharge from trust. So a whole range of metrics recognizing the pressure on adult mental health services specifically. And then I'm rattling through it as much as I can. We then had a third phase where we focused on ready for ward, and this was very much about supporting flow of patients through UEC systems. Once all of that was completed, we then started some work in 2020 around what was called chorus submissions. There were various of these. I think there were 4 or 5 of them. There were service-specific targets, and chorus was like critical hour standards. But the good news for everyone on this call is I don't need to go through them here because they were all stood down rapidly because they were unmanageable and we couldn't really get any standardization across the NHS. So I guess the reason to mention it here is that the pilot was very much a trial and error piece of work. Some of the standards worked and were implemented across all of the 14 pilot sites, and some didn't work at all and were stood down as a result. So yes, I'll hand over to Monica now to talk through some of the analysis that we implemented both internally and externally.
Thank you, Neil. Again, there is a lot to go through, so apologies in advance. So if we just go on to the next slide, please, Ruth. So this is just a view of what is reported externally. This is the return. As you can see, it's broken down by attendance type, by site, by the measures that Neil rattled through, and as well as admitted or not non-admitted. A point to make, it was in the previous slide, but I'm just going to say quickly, one of the requirements was to lump the type 1 and type 2 together as type 1. So here you will see there is no type 2, it's all under type 1. Okay, so very quickly on to the next one, please, Ruth. So here you'll see a dashboard view of effectively the same metrics that we just talked about, but in a more graphical view. This is the internal reporting platform we're using, ClickView. So it's the same metrics there, but in a more graphical view. So it is on a day-to-day basis. So that will be the day's reporting returns performance that we're reporting the day before. But you could look at a different day if you wanted to, or a group of days. If you very quickly move on to the next one, I'm trying to rattle through, there's a lot. So here you'll see a trend analysis of those same, so there's a trend analysis for all of those measures that we looked at previously, but obviously you need some context. So how are we doing in terms of those numbers? You know, what's our performance compared to last week, last year, last few days? So you can do that quite easily here. So the beauty of this is ClickView, you're able to drill down rapidly and quite with ease to the area of your interest. So you can look at the performance in a particular area, not just the aggregate numbers. So that is a real benefit for service, for the service to be able to pinpoint a particular area of interest. So if you move, thank you, Ruth. So as Neil mentioned, there was a few phases that we went through. And as a consequence, there was things that was introduced and then taken away. And as a consequence, there were certain timestamps that they were asking us to measure. And we recognise this as a bit of a benefit for us, really. So this, if you see on the left-hand side, is a picture of the pathway. So the patient's path, so the time, so the duration of patient through the various journey parts of the pathway. So if you say the very left is where they start, they come into the department, and the very right next to the dark green is when they leave the department. So those measures that Neil mentioned, time to initial assessment, referral to specialty scene, all of those are in those little blocks. So this very easily and graphically gives you an insight as to where the bottlenecks might be. So again, a valued piece for operational staff to be able to allocate resources as and when necessary. And also will give you an idea of if there's a problem on a particular day, for example. So if we move on, please. So what were the key challenges? So the key challenges for us was that we have two types of attendances across two different systems. So where you've got patients that were streamed from type 3 to type 1, the same patient is going from one system to another system, from one type to another type. And then you've also got the fact that you need to make a note of when they actually started their journey. So if they're being streamed to type 1, then the start time needs to be backdated to that new time in type 1, not type 3, because that would be incorrect. Then you've got mental health system. So with the mental health side of things, because we are not a mental health trust, we rely on data from mental health service. So we get a manual data feed of data. We need to be able to look at that data and match it to the data that we've got on our system to be able to work out the time to psych assessment. And then we've got third-party systems. So our type 3 third-party system, Vocare, they give us aggregate numbers. They're not able to give us patient level. So another challenge is that we need to be able to take the aggregate number and then as a proxy deaggregate it and then deaggregate and aggregate back up for the purposes of our reporting. Other challenges, manual validations. So where we've got unmatched records between two systems, we need manpower people to tell us, human error, people make mistakes on systems. So we need them to check them out and give us the data that we need. Any outliers of those little parts of the pathway that I mentioned, we just get people to double check them just as a safety. And same with the 12 hours, anything over 12 hours, some of them might be genuine, but it's safe to just get them checked. And then we've got changing pathways. So pandemic last year, we have to be very, needs must have to be very reactive, very quickly need to change our services. So the ED service had a red locations and green locations for COVID and non-COVID patients. And then of these patients, some patients were managed on one system and some patients were managed on the other system where they should. So type 3 was managed on type 1 wholly sometimes. Sometimes you'd have type 3 that was streamed to type 1. So it's just, twister, if you like, just trying to match up the different data sets to be able to identify the patients and then put them in the right box, if you like, for ECDS and reporting purposes. So yes, if we go on to the next slide. So what are our lessons learned? So our lessons learned, so where we used to report whole numbers for ED 4 hour, I think we found it a lot more, I think the services found it a lot more meaningful to be able to analyse them in more granular, in a more granular way. Like, for example, the first point there, admitted, non-admitted, there's a big difference between the actual time in A&E, 2 hours on average, and that was masked, if you like, in the aggregate numbers. And then with the movement of patients from one system to another, we need to be able to attribute the timestamps to the correct services, to the correct patients, and the correct pathways. Data quality, we need to align systems implementation to workflow to maximize completeness, because sometimes you will, if they don't align, you won't be able to record what you need to be able to report from. So ED working group, so we have a multidisciplinary ED working group on a 2 weekly, I think we started with a weekly, then we went to 2 weekly meetings. Really important to have those, because then we get really quick dynamic decision making, and to help with the data quality issues that we do have and address them and get them sorted. And also key to identify key personnel to be able to do the validations, first line, second line, because if any of those fall down, we're not able to report, especially with a lot of manual work that needs to be done and validation. And I think, you know, it would be wonderful to be able to plan a system and develop a system in advance, to be able to, you know, because to be able to apply the data that matches the actual service on the ground, but that's sometimes you know, difficult. So then we have to do some some tricky analysis work to be able to fit the data with the actual real life, what's happening on a cold face. That's a really quick run through. Sorry, I've gone over time.
No, that's great. Thank you both. Now, I haven't been able to keep an eye on the chat because I've been sharing. I can't see any questions. Does anyone have any questions for Neil or Monica? I know I've got a couple. Can't see any hands. So you were part of the pilot. If you had your time over again, would you still have been part of the pilot? Or would you like to go in the second wave? There's sometimes benefits and disbenefits for going first, isn't there?
Shall I go? I think
I've got an opinion, but you go first.
I think it's like ripping a plaster. Like, you just got to get on with it. I think I wouldn't mind going first. It's just, in a way, you could maybe affect what decisions to make. Like the chorus, for example. You know, we tried that, doesn't quite work. So yeah, and if you're ahead of the game, aren't you? You've got it down. So yeah, I think I'm not too against it.
Yeah, I think I was going to say the same thing. I think it's useful to see what's coming downstream and be able to have a chance to influence it as much as you can. I mean, obviously you don't have a lot of say all the time, but yeah, to be in that pilot I think was quite useful, and it kind of gave us a bit of a head start and gave us time to work through some of those issues, and especially the data quality challenges that where there were fields that we'd never really looked at before, never had much focus on, that were going to have a major impact on how we've been reported. If we were told at a later point to start reporting, having not been through the pilot, I think we would have struggled. So yeah, I think it was a good thing overall.
And I think this is coming for everyone soon in an acute provider, isn't it? I'm not quite sure of the national implementation date, but I think it's coming soon. Alan, you had your hand up first, and then we'll go to Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, well, excuse me, Monica, you made reference to the fact that your dashboards allowed clinical staff to make judgments as to how to redeploy staff and to try and accommodate fluctuations and minimize bottlenecks. Did you find the fact that you were looking at somewhat historic data impacted on the effectiveness of that, in terms of looking at how it was in the past few days could they make sort of future predictions or anticipations of what was going to happen based on that data?
To be honest, it's ED is ED. It doesn't change very much. So I think, you know, there's no seasonality. There's little seasonality. So I think it is, you know, the data that's there is helpful for them. Like if you look at Friday, for example, it's a whole different ball game to maybe, you know, a Tuesday. Yeah, so I think it does help, and obviously you're able to look at the most recent days just gone past. So, you know, you're not looking at things months and months ago. You've got days from literally days ago.
But you were able to correlate day on day, that sort of thing, and see that, as you said, you know, Fridays are peak times, and therefore modify your staffing to try and accommodate that.
Yeah. So yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Robert, you've been patiently waiting.
Thanks, Monica and Neil. That was really useful. I have two questions. The first one is, when you were looking at the ready for ward, has that translated into the clinically ready to proceed measure that we're now being asked to capture? Okay, great. And it sounds like you guys might have some insight. You see too many updates from the central teams in terms of these new measures. And I haven't yet seen any targets for the new measures. Is that something you're aware of?
I haven't seen any targets either. I'm not aware of any targets. You know, when we were in the pilot, it was very much, you know, let's see what the figures say. I look at Neil and Ruth. Have you heard of any targets?
No, that was the first thing we asked for as well, wasn't it? When we were starting the pilot, absolutely. First question was, well, what's the cutoff point? What are we aiming for here? And it got discussed a lot in the early days of the pilot, and they were very keen not to share anything. Like Monica says, they understandably wanted to see what the data was coming out before any targets were set. But yeah, I've not seen anything written down. I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of stays the position for a while, to be honest.
You'd think we would get an inside track, having been part of the pilot, and our medical director is just off to be the clinical director for emergency care for NHSE. But no, we're just as much in the dark. We'd be happy to share if we did have any info.
Okay, thank you. I mean, we're shadow reporting internally at the moment, and the execs would like to know whether we're achieving that target, and obviously we can't say at the moment. So, but thank you.
Right, I'm conscious of time, and we've got a really, thank you so much, Monica and Neil, that was brilliant. But I'm going to move us on now. I am delighted to be, I'm quite excited about the next presentation. I'm going to be listening to it avidly. We've got an introduction and overview to R. It's something I hear lots about. Something that I think some areas of the country and certain organisations are using quite extensively, other organisations not so much, and Imperial is one of those organisations that isn't using R very much at all at the moment. I want to know what all the fuss is about, so I'm going to hand over to Josie, who's very kindly joined us from NHS Gloucestershire, and I don't know if Anna's on the call as well. Josie, is she?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, you are. So apologies, Anna. I couldn't see you on the list. Anna and Josie from NHS Gloucestershire. And you're sharing your slides, aren't you? So you're doing the hard work.
Yeah, hopefully you can all see those.
We can, thank you.
Brilliant.
Cool, thank you. So Josie and I are just going to give you a really high level overview of R. So this isn't going to be technical at all. It's just going to be sort of an introduction to what it is, what you can use it for, what we use it for in Gloucestershire, and kind of how we got there, and then how you can get into using R yourself. So I'm Anna Schofield. I'm a senior BI analyst for Gloucestershire CCG.
And I'm Josephine Browning. I'm a senior business intelligence manager for analytics for Gloucestershire CCG. So about R. Hopefully these are gonna, yeah, be working. Awesome. So what is R and R Studio? So R and R Studio are two slightly separate but linked things. So R itself is an open source programming language and software environment for statistical computing and graphics. So R is the language, it's the engine and the chassis. if you look at it in car terms. And then we add RStudio. RStudio is the graphical user interface that provides an easy to use front end. So you take R, which is your engine and your chassis, and then you add all your bodywork, and that's what makes it really nice to drive. So we tend to use R and RStudio together, and when we teach R, we teach it within the RStudio framework. You can use R Pure, but it's command line prompt, so most people don't want to play in that. It's much easier to use in RStudio, and you can write the same scripts.
So why should you use R and kind of what can it do? So Josie and I have described it here as kind of the Swiss Army knife of programming language. So what we mean by that is that you kind of start off with the basic language, and then you can add on things called packages. And packages are what kind of lets you get into the statistics, the graphics, the automation. So one of the main things we use R for is for its statistical capabilities. And R can be used sort of right from the base level of just manipulating some data into a nicer format, all the way up to modeling, decision trees, machine learning. And these little hexes here are just a few packages that help you with that. So when you first download R, Tidyverse is quite a nice thing to download because it contains a lot of the basic packages that we'll use in a lot of our work. R can also be used to make some really nice graphics. So ggplot2 is what we tend to use for all of our graphs. So this kind of starts off with your basic like line graphs, bar charts, but it's got so many different ways you can customize it. You can get some really nice uniform graphs out there that you can use across your organization. There is also Sharingan, which is what we're using to make these slides. So you can see it's very similar to PowerPoint in output, but it's got a few different features in there that are quite unique to it. And then TMap is also a really good example. So this is what we use to make our maps. So you can make your sort of basic 2D static maps that you normally see, and then you can also make some really nice interactive maps, which we've used that package for before. You can also use R for a lot of automation. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but you can use things like R Markdown and knitr to output to Word documents, PDFs, PowerPoints. And you can use packages like purr to create a loop so that you can output multiple different PowerPoints with similar contents, but sort of different contents, which is a very mysterious way to put it, but we're going to talk a little bit about that later. And then finally, R is really nice for collaboration. So these are the logos for Git and GitHub and all of its sort of related capacities. And what you can do in R is you can upload your code to GitHub, and then different members of a team can take things called branches. So you can edit the code separately and put it back together again. And we found this is quite nice because when you're working in things like Excel, you get stuck where only one person can open it at a time. Whereas when you use things like GitHub, you can all sort of work on it separately and then bring it all back together again.
It's really good for collaborative coding and for agile development. Next one. So this is just a little bit about our journey of R within Gloucestershire. So our journey began back in 2019. So we've only been using R for about 2 years. So quite short time spans. So a neighbouring organisation to us, so BNSSG, which are down in Bath, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. They're one of our neighbouring clinical commissioning groups. They showed us some reports they'd worked on, which included a chart called a theoplot. And we were just really blown away by it and wanted to be able to create that locally for our population. So they very kindly shared their code with us, and that's where it all started. So after we'd used the theoplot code, and I literally jumped in at the deep end, writing what's called a shiny app, taking that code and trying to make it work on our data, it was quite an interesting week. We then had some system-wide training delivered by a chap called Chris Maney, who's part of the NHS community. And we had support from across our organisations. We're part of an ICS, so the training opportunity was offered to analysts from the entire ICS. So we trained as an ICS, but as a CCG, we've progressed further than some of our colleagues. So when we got the training, definitely availability of code sharing and support from the NHS community was really key to be able to move that forward. We pretty rapidly adopted R as a tool within Gloucestershire. We did, at the point at which we started using R, we didn't have any sort of BI tool. We've only very recently got Power BI, so we were still very much SQL and Excel based, certainly Excel getting things out to users. So R was something new and interesting for us to play with. Within 2 years, we've actually, R's really embedded within our team now. We've got a lot of analysts that are really good at using R, and we use it for a really wide variety of applications. So from just doing some of the quick ad hocs right through to some of like our major outputs, especially when we look at things like our data packs for cancer and our data packs for mental health. They're all compiled within R using the automation abilities within there. When we first pulled this in, I did it with a colleague who now works at GHFT, and we needed to showcase what we could do with R to get the senior leadership buy-in. So what helped for us was to build some nice outputs, and then we put that together in a presentation, presented it to our senior team in the, as far as BI and the CCG goes. And then once they see what we could do with it, they were very happy to support the use of it. The fact that R is free always helps the argument as well. So you do need a little bit of IT support to get them to allow you to install it on your systems. But our IT were very happy for us to have it. We've got it on our software centre now to download ourselves, which is great. So just a little bit of setup-y stuff, and you kind of ready to go with it. So this is about how we use R in Gloucestershire, and this is on the wrong chart. Sorry, Anna.
That's okay.
So I don't talk about survival curves until this chart jumps to the other one. So we use R to visualize statistical data. So this is an example of a Kaplan-Meier survival plot. So this is a way to demonstrate time to event data. So if you've got an at-risk population and you're looking for them to have a certain event to occur, for example, death, then you can plot sort of on average how long people will live before that point happens. I'm going to hand over to Anna to talk really quickly on this one.
So we also use it for odds ratio charts. So these are based on a regression model, and it's basically just a really nice way to show the model. So what this is showing is that patients with the particular outcome that we've modelled here, they're more likely to have things like mental illness and learning disabilities. And basically, it's just a really nice way to sort of view your cohort and your model in a visual way. And it kind of takes a cohort analysis one step further. So we do a lot of cohort analyses where we just kind of look at raw numbers of people with a certain condition. But this weights all of those against each other. So it gives you kind of a statistical likeliness of your cohort to have a certain characteristic. And I'm waiting for it to turn back.
It should jump again, sorry. The only downside to Sharingan is you couldn't put pictures on top of each other. Go, Anna.
So yeah, this is what it looks like. So it just gives you kind of a visual output of what your model looks like. So you can take the sort of confusing statistical numbers into just a graphical output. So another way we use it is for graphics. Oh, it's me. So these are the maps I was mentioning earlier. So this is using TMAP. So we used to do quite a lot of mapping in software called QGIS. Which is a really good piece of software, but it was quite limited how many people in our team had the software, and it's quite difficult to make multiple maps of very similar things. So now we've got a little chunk of code in R which lets you output a load of maps at the same time. And you can also make interactive maps, which is really cool. So when you hover over a map, it will pop up certain characteristics. It will tell you like the name of the GP practice, hospitals, all of those sorts of things.
And this is an example of one of those first Theo plots that we started with. So this is where it all started. So a Theo plot is a nice way to represent a patient journey over time. So this is a patient over sort of a 7-year period, and each of these dots is a contact with a particular level of care within our system. So you can see this patient obviously is a pretty high intensity user because they've got a significant amount of emergency and primary care usage there. And the other thing we do in R is automation.
So the first project I kind of got into in R was automating our board report, which is as scary as it sounds. So basically our board report is a massive PowerPoint of about 50 slides that we send out every month with performance data. So a member of our team used to compile all of this from Excel from scratch into the PowerPoint every single month, and it used to take about 1 or 2 days. So using Office R and packages like ggplot, it now takes me about half an hour to run it off, and then obviously everybody else adds their comments. But it's really saved us about a day and a half of time. And the application of how we made that, we've used in other things as well. So that odds ratio chart I showed is from our population health management tool. So that's very similar. So it pulls together things like a map, a decision tree, an odds ratio chart, some cohort analysis graphs, and it outputs them all into a PowerPoint. So anyone in our team can use that code, just tweak what cohort they're looking at, and then they'll get sort of a fully fledged PowerPoint that they can just go and show to commissioners as is. So it's really helped us on kind of cutting down time for things like the board report, but also for sort of making the statistical and mapping and visual abilities of R a lot more accessible to our team without the whole team having to write the code from scratch.
We also similarly use it for sort of cancer packs and mental health packs that go to our primary care network groups. So we've got 15 primary care networks, and it means you can output the same data presentation, but with 15 slightly different slants on it. But in one go, rather than having to write 15 separate presentations for each of the primary care networks. So that's where the automation really comes in handy in R. It's a massive time saver. The other thing we've done for automation in R was the use of, we made some shielded patient letters. So right back at the start of the pandemic, when we were really in the crisis, we set up a telephone line system where we were calling the shielded patients to make sure they're okay. It was like a telephone welfare check on our patients to support our GP practices. And then the ask was to create transcripts of all those phone calls to go into the patient record, so they had to come out in a PDF format. But there was 3,000 telephones to type up the transcripts of, which obviously would have been quite a horrific manual task. But we used R and R Markdown to actually automate that process. So all of the data from the transcripts was held in an SQL table, so we could link directly to our warehouse, pull the required information in, compile the letter, and then save it down by running through a loop into a separate folder for each GP practice to make it easy for the commissioners to send out. So it was quite a nice piece of code. And if we hadn't have written the code in R to do it, I don't think we'd have been able to support that project at all, because it just wouldn't have been possible to do manually in the timescales. It was very fast turnaround. Right. So how do you get into R? If you're all interested in learning a bit more about R and how to actually get behind the wheel and have a play, we'd recommend trying to get onto the one-day Introduction to R training course, which is hosted by the NHS R community. It's free to members of the NHS and public sector. It's very, very popular. So I know the next 3 courses that are on Eventbrite are already sold out. But there may be ways of getting some more courses run. NHS are looking to run more courses, but it depends on the trainer's time. There's also an NHSR conference, which is virtual, and it's being held in the first 2 weeks of November. So that's a week of workshops, training, and then a week of sort of showcasing our work and presentations from different people and part of the community. Again, it's free, and because it's virtual, you can just drop in and drop out of what you're interested in. The one-day Introduction to R course will be running during that week, that first week as well, and I'm actually teaching that one. So if you sign up, you might be able to get in on the one-day course in November. And then things like this, because R is open source in nature, there is so much out there that's free and available training materials. I definitely recommend the book R for Data Science, written by Hadley Wickham. He's basically an R guru. It's freely available online, but you can get a hard copy. If there's anything you're trying to do and you get stuck with your code, Stack Overflow is a great resource. When it comes to R, most things that can be done have been done and will have been blogged about it somewhere. So we've learned a lot of our stuff just from trawling the internet and finding sort of blog tutorials. And then the only other thing is download it and have a play. It's very much sort of a self-taught kind of software. We can get you started, the NHSR community can get you started, but ultimately it's about jumping in the deep end and playing with some code. Has anyone got any questions?
I don't know whether you can see, because you might be screen sharing, lots of virtual applause at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, ladies. So there's a couple of hands up, I think. Robert.
Thanks, both. That was really interesting. We've kind of had the reverse approach. We've got Power BI finally implemented, and now we're trying to develop that R capacity. How do you envisage fitting those two together, and have you done anything like that to date?
So we've got the ability turned on in our Power BI to be able to write code in Power BI, but because we're so new to that side of things, we haven't got anything integrated yet. We definitely see them as separate solutions. So they're probably going to fulfill quite different things. So our Power BI will be kind of our self-service portal of reports for people to be able to click and do a little bit of diving in the data, and then we'll use R to do the sort of the really big analytics, and we're working on some machine learning projects. So definitely kind of they work nicely together, so they definitely complement each other, but we're keeping them fairly separate.
Great, thank you. Well, if you have any progress with your machine learning, that would be of interest as well. Thank you both.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to ask the question that was burning in my mind while you were presenting. So you mentioned, I mean, fantastic use cases, fantastic presentation. Love your enthusiasm. Thank you for sharing it. So you mentioned R being better than Excel. What about R versus SQL? Were you using Microsoft SQL before R came along, and has it replaced it?
So we kind of use them for different things. So we still keep all of our massive data sets in SQL, because I will say the one kind of possible downfall of R is that it does quite a lot of its processing on your computer. Correct me if I'm wrong, Josie. So it kind of sometimes needs a bit of tweaking of the data before you put it in. But I think, again, they kind of work together. So quite often I'll use R to manipulate some data to get it into a format where I can put it into SQL. And then I'll do it the other way, where I'll query from SQL directly into R. So they kind of work together, but I don't think they could particularly replace each other, at least not in our team.
No, you certainly want to replace SQL with R. That wouldn't work, because it's not a sort of a databasey type of programming language. But you can certainly use them together, because you can write SQL code within your R script and go and grab the data for you from the warehouse, which is quite handy when you're automating stuff.
Really fantastic. Thank you. I found your presentation really, really insightful. I hope others on the call did too. I think from the amount of applause, they absolutely did. Very, you're welcome back anytime to come and share your journey with us, and very grateful for your time today. Feel free to stay on the call, or, you know, if you have to leave, completely understand as well. Oh, I missed a question. Sorry, I've got a hand up. Is that Aparna?
Yes, hello Ruth, how are you? Lovely to see you. Thank you, Josephine and Anna. Lovely to see the introduction to R, because I work with Rob. Rob is my line manager, actually. So the burning question I had was, have you used R and Power BI together? As in, so there is an option within Power BI where you do R scripts. So does it work very well with you, or you just standalone use Power BI's in R?
So we haven't tried that yet, because we are very, very early in our journey of Power BI. So we've only just got one dashboard up live. So we haven't tested how well R works within Power BI yet, but it is on our list of to do.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Right, thank you, ladies. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on. Next up on the agenda is Tom with some reflections on an event we held back in July. So over to you, Tom, and I know you have to go, I think, around about 3:30. So over to you.
Thanks, Ruth, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I guess AphA is all about the analyst network and bringing people together. And we've seen today some useful kind of presentations, some really useful and interesting presentations from colleagues. But AphA is also about trying to build relationships and networks between individuals within the analytics community across London and beyond. And, you know, we want to try and facilitate that as a organisation. So we were thinking about this group and what we get out of this group. And obviously, as you've seen, there's lots of information that gets presented here, and there's some limited time for questions and answers. But perhaps there's lots of people in the background in this call that their faces haven't been shown, we haven't heard their voices, we still don't really know them. Unless they presented on a topic here, we probably wouldn't get to know them in this kind of forum. So me and Ruth and Catherine were thinking about how could we help people get to know each other a little bit better across the network. And so we envisaged this kind of networking session. And I mean, to me, networking sounds a bit kind of corporate and sort of perhaps a bit of a turn off in terms of a word, but really it's all just about getting to put a face to a name, hearing a bit about the person's background, and finding out what your shared interests are, so that you can then benefit by catching up with each other on a particular topic outside of this kind of forum, being able to pick up the phone and know who you're talking to, knowing that somebody on the call on the other end of the line is going to be knowledgeable about something or other that you're interested in. And so we thought doing a session where we kind of help people to get together and get to know each other a bit better would be useful. So back at the end of July, we held such a session for the first time, and we had about 17 people come along, which was quite a nice number for the first go. And I'm hoping that future sessions will get even more. And what we did was we just spent 90 minutes and we went around the room, and everybody had the opportunity to introduce themselves, say a bit about who they are, where they work, what their career's been to date, and what their areas of interest are. And that really kind of then gave rise to a little bit of discussion, a few questions, and then on to the next person. And it was a really sort of nice, warm session where people kind of were able to get to know each other just a little bit as a primer, hopefully for them to be in touch with each other later on for whatever their particular reason might be. So I think there's quite a lot in it really for analysts. It's an opportunity to build the number of people that you know who are interested in the things that you're interested in. And that could well lead to collaborations in future. If you know that somebody like some of the people that we've heard today are the experts in some of the things that they've talked about today, if you're interested in those things, you'll probably be in touch, perhaps with Neil about ED metrics, or Joe about R. So it's a good way of kind of us all working together more closely in the future. And who knows, maybe there could be employment opportunities in the future through this kind of networking. Maybe Ruth will give you a job at Imperial. So there's kind of lots of benefits for the attendees of these kinds of sessions. So we're hoping that we'll put on some more such sessions in the future. I'm hoping it won't be always the same group of people. Otherwise we'll just have one sort of core of AphA that knows each other really well, and everyone else kind of on the fringe. But I think there's probably well over 1,000 analysts working in London, and we need to kind of link them all up and get people to know each other and get people to work together with each other. That's what AphA is all about. So I hope that you can sort of tell your friends about the work that we're doing, as AphA. Tell them about any future networking opportunities. Maybe don't call it networking. Maybe we won't call it networking. Tell your friends, get them along to the session, and perhaps we can all kind of build this community to an even bigger group. So that's what we're doing. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. If there are any questions for Tom, please do raise your hand. But yeah, it was a great session, and it was a brilliant opportunity to get to know some of you better. And I was absolutely fascinated by the variety of analysts. There is no such thing as a typical analyst anymore. It's just so diverse. It was amazing to hear about people's job roles and their journeys into analytics as well in healthcare. It's fantastic. So thanks to Tom for hosting that session and putting in a large amount of the organisation for it. Right, I'm going to move as swiftly on got an eye on the time as usual. Julia, we're very lucky to have Julia with us today. Julia is the Director of Regions for AphA, which means that she supports people like myself, Tom and Catherine, from a national perspective. So not only does she get to go to the London branch meeting, she gets to go to all of the others too. Your diary must be quite full. So we're really grateful to have you here, Julia. And whatever you would like to tell us about what AphA is doing at national level, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Ruth. Can you hear me okay? Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
It's blank at the moment, though, just with the titles. Yeah,
yes,
great.
Animations on it. I've gone old school. So I'll just spend a few minutes. I won't take up too much of your time. But you know, if anybody's ever got any questions, please reach out to me. And you know, any feedback or suggestions are gratefully received. So let me see if I can move this on. I've got two screens. Yeah, so we've in terms of the branch numbers, members numbers, London has grown hugely over the last few months, which is amazing to see. I think that's, you know, down to Ruth and her team and all the hard work they've been putting in. So, you know, brilliant. I'm so pleased to see the branch growing, and hopefully will carry on growing. I had my team have built a little sort of Tableau dashboard, which we're hoping to get onto the AphA website, just a little interactive dashboard, and that apparently is ready. So we're going to launch that soon. So when that's available, I'll let you know, and then you can sort of have a drill down. I think the suggestion was, can we drill down a layer below that to see where AphA members in each trust are? So won't name AphA members, just, you know, how many each trust has. Obviously our meetings are still virtual, and just want to remind people that you know, there's no limit on the number of branch meetings you can attend. If you go onto the AphA website, then you can find out where the other branch meetings are as well, and join as many as you want to. So you know, I know that we have people outside of London joining the London one and vice versa, but yeah, please keep an eye out for that, and you're more than welcome to go to as many branch meetings as you want. There's quite a few being set up now before the end of the year, so have a little look and check those out. One of the things that I was involved in was setting up a pilot mentors program. We have 12 partnerships set up at the moment. We've had the summer, so I haven't sort of hassle people too much, but I'll be reaching out to those sort of pilot sort of trailblazing mentors and mentees to get their feedback and see what adjustments we need to make to the programme and the way that it was set up and what have you. And then we'll put a call out for another round unless there's any sort of major issues before the end of the year, so the next few weeks. So look out for that. It would be great we might adjust the sort of the application matching form a little bit, because one of the things that we perhaps have had feedback so far is would people like a mentor within their own region, so close to them so they can physically meet up, or would they like to be matched to someone who's, you know, the other end of the country, so they're quite happy to do it on Teams and would quite like the possibility to sort of meet up with someone in a completely different system to themselves. So that'll be something that we'll incorporate in the next round. But so far the feedback has been great, and people are sort of grateful to be involved. Certainly the mentees that I've spoken to are excited to be able to sort of have someone that they can, you know, class as a mentor and share their sort of issues and what have you. So yeah, so if you want to get involved, please, as a mentor or a mentee or both, maybe you've got someone who's doing both at the moment, then please look out for those updates or email me, and I'll make sure I put you in a special folder in my inbox so that when things do kick off again, I can reach out to you. Quite a few of you have mentioned Power BI and what have you. Just something I thought I'd mention for those that you that are using Tableau. I did have someone reach out to me a couple of weeks ago who is happy to set up a Tableau training session, sort of top tips and things in the future. And I don't know if there's enough Tableau people within the sort of the London branch to warrant that, or we want a special sort of one-off Tableau session that people can join if they want to. But if you're interested in Tableau, then please let me know, and this could be something that we just put on as a national one-off meeting that people can join, rather than making it a branch specific meeting. So again, Ruth, if you've got any feedback on that, let me know. But I thought I'll put it in here, otherwise I'll totally go out my mind. But yeah, they offer online training and mentoring, so I thought I'd let you know about that. The machine learning challenge, the Analyst X machine learning challenge, there is a competition open at the moment through Analyst X, and I can share the link with you. It's actually on these slides, which I can share. I can put it in the chat if you want to. That's supposed to be closing at the end of this week, so please, if you've got any sort of modelling predictions, prediction modelling for related to COVID and recovery, then please enter the competition, because there's an amazing opportunity to not only share the work and raise the profile and the fantastic work your team are doing, but also link up with other teams that are doing sort of similar work. So please have a look at that if you don't know about it. There is still time to enter. Next slide. We also, because I'm involved in Analyst X, we do have a couple of places left on a fully funded machine learning training course. And I thought I'd use my sort of links in with AphA to see if anybody would be interested in joining that. I know the call has gone out through the ICSs, but we do have a couple of places left. So if anybody would be available at very short notice to join that 4-day online course, then please let me know. And if there are some spaces left by the time I go back into the spreadsheet that various people are filling at the moment, I can let you know. If those places have gone by the time you get in touch with me, then and there is a special email address there, then I can register your interest and let you know for the next course when it comes on. But basically they're reaching out to ICSs, so anybody that's working with an ICS, whether it be sort of within a trust or within an ICS itself, in a CSU, are welcome to join. So please just let me know, and I'll put your name down. So I think that's it from me from a sort of an AphA point of view. But like I say, if there's anything that you think that I should be doing that I'm not doing, then please let me know. If you need any help in any way, then I'm more than happy to help where I can. But yeah, my next focus for the next few weeks is to get ready for the next mentorship round. So yeah, really be happy to hear from anybody that's wanting to get involved in that. There you go.
Thanks.
That's it. 10 minutes.
Thanks, Julia. Always appreciate your updates, and there was a lot of content there. It just amazes me how much is going on in the analyst community these days. It's absolutely fantastic to see. I think we were all more commonly working in silos 5 years ago, not necessarily networking with each other quite as much as we do now, and it's just brilliant to see all the training opportunities. And I would definitely recommend people getting involved in the Mentee Mentor program. I'm a mentor currently, thoroughly enjoying my experience and getting a lot out of it personally. So I'd very much recommend it to others. I'm going to move us on in the interest of time again. To our colleagues at the London Skills Development Network, who we always give a slot here because we have such a shared agenda, and the more people trying to deliver the vision for analytics and trying to bring up that next generation of analysts in healthcare, the merrier as far as we're concerned. So I'd like to welcome Soteris, I'd like to welcome Brian and Alyssa, and about 5 minutes to give us an overview of anything you want to tell us that's going on in the skills development network that towards in the analytics community. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Brian, are you okay to lead, or do you want me to just run through the points we had at the ISD board recently?
Yeah, do you want to lead, Soteris, and I'll jump in at the end if there's anything else to add. Thanks.
Just to cover off some of the actions and things we're working on currently in the ISD board, we recently met. So Ellis is here today, and I invited her to come along today, and she'll be coming in the future, and she'll be leading on more work. So Elissa is the ISD coordinator, but also supports me with the procurement and finance elements of the community as well, because we cover those two professional groups. So in terms of some of the things that are currently going on, Elissa is working on a stakeholder map and resource map, because there's so many things going on in different organisations, and we found it a useful exercise to do for finance, and we're trying to do the same for informatics. So we're trying to understand who the key stakeholders are in all the organisations and what's going on and what the resources are, and just trying to map it down in one place, and we'll share that with you once we have it. The other thing that Elissa leads on is the accreditation process, and we've got 4 accredited organisations, and we are setting timescales and targets around how we move the accreditation process forward. Elissa is the contact. If anyone's interested, please contact her, and we have a resource area dedicated to it on the website. A lot of discussion currently is around the remit of ISD. We are being influenced by HE to expand the network to include CNIOs and CCIOs, and we're currently in that discussion to understand what the implications are, what the resource implications are of working with those two groups. So we're looking at potential expansion, and we've had a lot of discussion around the staffing census collection and in terms of the remit of what we collect. I think Elissa is going to be moving forward, and if anyone's interested in being involved in that work, Brian, Ellis, and a few of the board members are meeting for a subgroup to really define, and it's part of the work led by James Freed at HE in terms of understanding the remit of what data we want to collect and what roles and qualifications we want to cover. The national collection is very broad. It picks up clinical coders, ICT, data warehousing. We've collected historically data on a narrow basis around information and analysts, and we're just trying to agree what the boundary is and what we want to collect, and there's a subgroup taking on that work to be able to do that. But I think we will be moving forward for a national collection probably in the autumn, moving forward. We've decided to have an ISD lead conference in January as well. So anyone who's an ISD, so that's the Informatics Skills Development Network, and these are just senior informatics people who are responsible for the performance and development of the team. In a lot of cases, we've got CIOs who are the ISD leads, but we are trying to encourage them to delegate it down to their deputies or heads of departments who are more hands-on to the day-to-day management of the teams in terms of their performance management and development needs. And we are running a development ambassadors program to help support the ISD lead role within the organisation moving forward, and that will be set with finance and procurement. We're bringing them all together to look at generically how they can influence, engage, influence upwards, communicate, signpost people to networks and to resources, and support with development within organisations. And part of that discussion will be moving forward in terms of some of the discussions we need to have with the ICSs moving forward. We plan to have an SDN strategy which will incorporate ISD, and that will be a generic strategy. And we are learning from the National Finance Academy and National PSD talent boards, which are already formed, in terms of how we can move forward, and we are trying to influence the HE agenda around how we do talent management moving forward. So that's a space to watch in terms of some of the development we're going to take moving forward. And I think the only other thing is we've launched the ISD program. We run on an academic year, so it's from September to July. So anyone that wants courses, they're on the website and available to book onto. So the ISD program is up and running for the year. And I think they're the key things. Have I missed anything, Brian, Elisa?
Just from my perspective, I think the important point just to emphasise is that everything we provide to users, so whether that's the accreditation or the events that we run or the trainings, that's all free to people. So I'd kind of encourage you to kind of look at the website and link in with your ISD lead locally. And if you don't know who that lead is, then feel free to contact Elisa or myself or Satiris, and we can point you in the direction. But kind of recommend visiting the website, as Elisa put in the chat. There's things like our courses on there, but there's other courses as well. And I think the point of and really grateful for Ruth and others letting us have these 5 minutes or so. But the importance of us is making sure we engage with other groups like AphA and others looking at this ground, and it's about collaborating and complementing one another. That's the key thing for me. Thank you.
Thanks all. Yeah, do check out the programme of training courses. It really is quite extensive. It's the kind of best free training courses around, and I know training budgets are one of the first places to get cut, aren't they, when funding's tight across the health sector. So it's a fantastic resource to have a look at. Thanks all, really grateful for you coming and giving an update and participating in the meeting as well. So I'm going to move you on now and hand over to Catherine, where we'll do the asking you to vote on what you'd like to hear about at the next meeting, and then I'll go through the dates for the future upcoming meetings. So Catherine, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. I've just popped in the chat the link, but I'm just going to share my screen so we can all see the poll as it is at the moment. So I think we've got quite a few topics on there for you to vote upon. And again, if there's anything else that you might be interested in, pop it in the chat, and then we can get it on the agenda maybe for another meeting. So the numbers at the top for the Menti code, I think 75 74 046. I did note I was keeping an eye on it during the sort of the meeting, and there was thank you to everyone who's been voting. So yes, we're looking at analytics coaching, looking at the difference between Click and BI, cloud data warehouses, demand and capacity. I think especially this is quite an interesting one, obviously, with this, a lot of informatics teams moving online, working from home. So how effective teams can work remotely. Looking at the maternity data set, model hospital, I know is again a big topic at the moment. It's much definitely becoming more prevalent. I think we're trying to get someone from the data liaison service, especially with the changes to ECDS and the ISN for the new CDSs that have been issued. Obviously robotic process automation and maybe data opt-out. So they're the options that we thought that were good for the next meeting. But again, if there's anything else, pop it in the chat. So we're getting all 13 so far, so that's good. Maybe another minute or two just to so we can get everyone there. So I think we're getting quite sort of three standing out. I think obviously analytics coaching and effective remote working and robotics. So that's looking like they're the three at the moment, potentially for the next meeting. And
I'm loving the analytics in action.
I know.
Catherine, well done.
That's all right. Yeah. That's okay. So yes, I think give it another minute. If there's any more, we can close that, and I can hand back over to Ruth. So Ruth, that's sort of, I think that there's two definitely standing out there. So I think there's 15. I'll leave it open. I think it's going to be open probably to the end of the day. So if you do you know, after the meeting, think, oh, do you know something that actually I would like to vote for that. Please come back on. It will be open for the rest of the day. So and then I'll pick up the results tomorrow. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand back over to Ruth.
Great, thanks, Catherine, for starting on that. And we really do want to hear about what you want to hear about. So yeah, if you haven't already voted, please do. Or indeed, you know, we've obviously suggested some topics there. There may be other things that you either want to hear about or things that are going on in your organisation that you might want to share. So that's part of the agenda that we are always really keen to hear from members, because there is some fantastic stuff going on around London. I'm just going to share my screen now. And here are the diary dates, the future meeting dates. So this is actually the last meeting this year. We were thinking about having another one in December, but on balance, I think it's actually a really busy time of year for people. So our next meeting will be February, unless there's a demand for another kind of networking event, which we're happy to put on, where people can come along and meet each other. So please do note these dates down. We will make sure the website's up to date and the Eventbrite links are open, so you can book on them. Of course, we've got the AphA conference. I know Val put something in the chat about this, and it'll be open to booking. That will be face-to-face. Oh, I wanted to say about the London branch meetings. Tom, Catherine and I had a discussion about whether we should have hybrid events, alternate face-to-face, online, and we concluded that we should stay online. And the reason being, the main driver is that we want to be as inclusive as possible and make it as easy for people to attend as possible. And sometimes trekking in to central London to meet is not a good use of people's time when everybody's really busy. Now, if people do have strong feelings about wanting a face-to-face meeting, please let me know, drop me a line. Contact me on LinkedIn or ruth.holland@nhs.net. Always happy to hear people's views. But for now, the plan is to stay online and do our meetings via Teams. And then the other way that people can get involved is by writing a magazine article. If you feel that you communicate better in writing, AphA is always happy to receive articles from members, which will be published in the monthly magazine that you should all receive automatically. But the one we'll put a call out for 15th of February. If anyone would like to showcase their work, please do come forward. It's a really good learning and development opportunity for you as well to present to your peers. I don't know whether your teams in your organisations have much opportunity to do that. I know our departmental meetings are pretty busy and we don't get to showcase what we do to each other that often. So this is a great opportunity. Okay, if there is, I'm going to stop sharing. If there is no other business, then I'm going to give you a whole 8 minutes back in your life. But thank you everybody for contributing to the meeting. Delighted that the London branch is growing, and yeah, get involved. We'd really love to hear from you. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, Ruth. Great meeting.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, Ruth.
Bye.
Thank you.